Blood trickled down Sophie's forehead as she slumped in her wheelchair. One moment, my disabled daughter was laughing at the playground. The next, HOA President Mrs. Warner stood over her with a metal pipe in hand. She was reaching for my phone, the woman shrieked. But we all saw what really happened. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Get that disgusting wheelchair off my playground. The shrill voice cut through the peaceful Sunday afternoon like broken glass. I turned to see Mrs. Evelyn Warner, our HOA president, storming across the playground toward us, her designer heels stabbing the rubber surface with each angry step. My daughter Sophie froze in her wheelchair, her smile instantly vanishing. At 11 years old, she had already learned that some people saw only her disability, not the bright, beautiful child beneath. "Excuse me?" I said, stepping protectively between Mrs. Warner and my daughter. "You heard me," she snapped, gesturing at the adaptive swing where Sophie had been laughing just moments before. "These facilities aren't meant for her kind. This is a playground for normal children." The beautiful spring day, the kind where the air feels clean after rain and children's laughter creates a symphony, suddenly turned cold. Sophie had been begging to visit this new community playground for weeks. Despite the challenges she faced daily with her spina bifida, her joy remained pure and undiminished, until now. Getting Sophie ready had taken time that morning. Her leg braces needed careful attention, and her medication schedule couldn't be disrupted. But by noon we were ready. I had helped her into her wheelchair, packed her favorite snacks, and headed to the playground that our homeowners association had recently built, supposedly for all the children in our community. When we arrived, the playground was bustling with activity. Children climbed, swung, and chased each other while parents chatted on nearby benches. I had wheeled Sophie to the adaptive swing, designed specifically for children with physical disabilities. "Can you push me high, Daddy? I want to touch the clouds." Sophie's eyes had sparkled with excitement as I secured her into the swing. For 20 beautiful minutes, Sophie soared. Her laughter rang out across the playground, drawing smiles from other parents. In those moments, she wasn't a child with disabilities, she was just a child, experiencing the simple joy of flying through the air. Until Mrs. Warner arrived to destroy everything. "These specialized swings are meant for toddlers, not her," Mrs. Warner continued, gesturing dismissively at my daughter. "She's too big and she's been on it for too long. Other children need a turn." I looked around. There was no one waiting, and there were 3 empty regular swings beside us. "My daughter can't use the regular swings," I explained, struggling to keep my voice calm though my heart raced with anger. "This is the only swing she can use safely." "I don't care what she can or can't do," Mrs. Warner snapped. "Rules are rules. The HOA guidelines clearly state that all playground equipment must be shared and that no child should use any piece for more than 15 minutes if others are waiting." "But no one is waiting," I pointed out. "That's not the point." Her voice grew louder. "The point is that your daughter is too old for this area. This section is for children under 5. Read the sign." I hadn't noticed the small sign partially hidden behind a bush. It did indeed say for ages 2 to 5, but the adaptive swing was the only one of its kind in the entire playground. "Where is she supposed to play then?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. "That's not my problem. I'm simply enforcing the rules that everyone agreed to when they moved here." Sophie's eyes filled with tears as she sensed the tension. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I don't want to break the rules." "You're not breaking any rules, sweetheart," I assured her, though I shot Mrs. Warner a look that made it clear exactly what I thought of her and her rules. "Yes, she is," Mrs. Warner insisted, reaching for her phone. "I'm documenting this violation. You'll be receiving a fine in the mail." Other parents had started to notice the commotion. Some looked uncomfortable, but no one intervened. "We'll leave the swing," I said finally, not wanting to upset Sophie further. "But she deserves to be here as much as any other child." As I began to unfasten Sophie from the swing, Mrs. Warner stepped closer, tapping furiously on her phone. "This isn't the first time your family has violated HOA regulations," she muttered. "The ramp you installed at your front door doesn't match the approved colors, and those medical equipment deliveries disrupt the neighborhood aesthetic." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I helped Sophie back into her wheelchair, trying to stay calm for her sake. "Let's go find another spot to play, Sunshine," I said, using my nickname for her. We wheeled toward the sandbox area, where I thought Sophie might enjoy feeling the sand between her fingers. There was a concrete path leading right up to it, a rare accessible feature in this playground. But Mrs. Warner wasn't finished with us. She followed, still recording with her phone. "That area is also for younger children," she called after us. "And wheelchairs aren't allowed in the sandbox. They damage the specially sourced hypoallergenic sand that cost the HOA thousands of dollars." I stopped and turned to face her. "My daughter has every right to play here. Please leave us alone." "Don't take that tone with me," Mrs. Warner hissed. "I can have your HOA privileges revoked entirely." By now, Sophie was crying silently, big tears rolling down her cheeks. My heart broke seeing her joy destroyed by this woman's cruelty. "We'll just sit by the picnic tables then," I said, desperate to salvage something of our outing. As I turned Sophie's wheelchair, one of the wheels caught on an uneven seam in the sidewalk. The chair tilted slightly. Instinctively, I reached to steady it, letting go of the backpack I was carrying. It fell to the ground, spilling some of Sophie's medical supplies and snacks. I bent down to gather our belongings when I heard Sophie scream. The sound made my blood freeze. I looked up to see Mrs. Warner standing over Sophie, a metal pipe in her hand, part of the playground's construction materials that had been left behind. Blood was streaming down my daughter's forehead. She was trying to grab my phone. Mrs. Warner shouted, but her eyes were wide with the realization of what she'd done. I rushed to Sophie, who had slumped in her wheelchair, her body terrifyingly still. "Call an ambulance," I screamed to the stunned parents watching. "I didn't mean to," Mrs. Warner began, dropping the pipe with a clang. I didn't hear the rest of her words. The world narrowed to my daughter's pale face and the blood matting her beautiful brown hair. Someone handed me a clean towel, and I pressed it gently against the wound, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. "Stay with me, sunshine. Help is coming. I've got you, baby girl." The ambulance arrived in minutes that felt like centuries. The paramedics worked quickly, stabilizing Sophie and loading her into the ambulance. One of them asked what happened. Before I could answer, a father stepped forward, a man I'd seen at community events but had never spoken to. "I recorded everything," he said, holding up his phone. "That woman hit the child with a pipe when her back was turned." Mrs. Warner's face drained of color. "It was an accident. She was going to grab my phone. I just reacted." The police arrived shortly after the ambulance left with Sophie and me. The last thing I saw as we pulled away was Mrs. Warner gesturing frantically as an officer placed her in handcuffs. The hospital waiting room was a special kind of hell. Doctors rushed Sophie into emergency surgery to relieve the pressure building in her brain. I called my sister, who arrived within the hour to sit with me through the nightmare. "Mr. Thompson?" A surgeon finally emerged, still in his scrubs. "Your daughter is stable." I nearly collapsed with relief. "But," he continued, his face grave, "she suffered a significant traumatic brain injury. We won't know the full extent of the damage until she wakes up." "When will that be?" my sister asked, gripping my hand. "That's up to Sophie now. She's in a medically induced coma to help her brain heal." For 5 days I barely left Sophie's bedside. I talked to her continuously, reminiscing about our favorite memories, promising her trips to the beach, to Disney World, anywhere but that playground. The doctors were cautiously optimistic as the swelling in her brain gradually subsided. On the 6th day, Sophie opened her eyes. "Daddy?" she whispered, and I thought my heart would burst with joy. But my elation quickly turned to horror as I realized something was terribly wrong. Sophie's eyes, though open, held no recognition. "Who are you?" she asked, shrinking away from me in fear. "Where's my mommy?" Sophie's mother had passed away when she was just 3 years old. The neurologist explained it gently. Sophie had suffered significant memory loss. The injury had damaged the parts of her brain that stored her personal memories. She remembered nothing of the past 8 years. Not our life together, not her mother's death, not even her disability. Every time she tried to move and found she couldn't, panic overtook her. I had to reintroduce myself to my own daughter. I had to tell her that her mother was gone. I had to explain why her body wouldn't obey her commands. I had to watch her grieve losses she'd already grieved once before. Meanwhile, the case against Mrs. Warner was building. The video evidence was damning. Multiple witnesses came forward, describing not just the attack itself but a pattern of discrimination against Sophie and other disabled residents. The district attorney charged Mrs. Warner with assault with a deadly weapon and a hate crime enhancement because she had targeted Sophie based on her disability. The HOA board quickly distanced themselves from her, claiming they had no knowledge of her actions toward disabled residents. But a whistleblower from inside the HOA office revealed emails in which Mrs. Warner had complained about the unsightly medical equipment at our house and suggested changing the bylaws to prohibit visible mobility aids in front yards. She had been waging a quiet war against us and others like us for years. Public outrage was immediate and intense. News outlets picked up the story. Disability rights activists protested outside the HOA offices. Online petitions demanded justice for Sophie. Mrs. Warner's previously pristine reputation crumbled. Her interior design business lost clients. Her friends distanced themselves. Her husband filed for divorce, unwilling to stand by her after what she'd done. None of it mattered to me. My entire world had narrowed to a hospital room where my daughter looked at me with the eyes of a stranger. Sophie's recovery was grueling. She had to relearn who I was each morning. She had to be told repeatedly why she couldn't walk. Each day was Groundhog Day, the same fears, the same confusion, the same heartbreak. But slowly, tiny fragments of memory began to return. She remembered the taste of chocolate ice cream, her favorite. She hummed a lullaby I used to sing to her, though she couldn't recall where she'd heard it. Physical healing came faster than the emotional healing. The wound on her head closed, leaving an angry red scar that would eventually fade. But the wound to her spirit seemed insurmountable. Until Max came along. Max was a therapy dog, a gentle golden retriever trained to work with traumatic brain injury patients. From the moment he padded into Sophie's hospital room, something changed. Sophie's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen since before the attack. "Puppy!" she exclaimed, reaching out with uncertain hands. Max nuzzled against Sophie's palm, his tail wagging softly. Something about the dog's unconditional acceptance broke through barriers that human efforts couldn't penetrate. With Max's help, Sophie began to make remarkable progress. The therapy dog visited daily, and Sophie began to remember him from one day to the next. A small miracle that gave us hope. Mrs. Warner's trial coincided with Sophie's release from the hospital. I was called to testify, leaving Sophie in my sister's care. The courtroom fell silent as I described not just the physical attack, but its devastating aftermath. "My daughter doesn't know who I am most mornings," I said, my voice breaking. "She has to relearn that her mother is dead. She has to rediscover her own disability. Every single day." Mrs. Warner sat at the defense table, head bowed. She looked smaller somehow, her designer clothes replaced by a modest suit, her perfectly styled hair now dull and limp. When she took the stand in her own defense, she offered no excuses. "I was wrong," she said simply. "I became so obsessed with property values and rules that I forgot about people. I forgot that communities are made of human beings, not regulations. What I did to that little girl was unforgivable. I don't expect forgiveness, but I am truly sorry." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Mrs. Warner guilty on all counts. The judge, noting the premeditated nature of her discrimination, sentenced her to 12 years in prison. As Mrs. Warner was led away, our eyes met briefly across the courtroom. I expected to feel satisfaction, maybe even joy at seeing justice served. Instead, I felt only emptiness. No punishment could give Sophie back her memories. Life after the trial settled into a new routine. We moved to a different neighborhood, one without an HOA, where a community association welcomed us with open arms. Neighbors built a wheelchair-accessible playground in the common area, with Sophie's input guiding the design. Max came to live with us permanently, sleeping at the foot of Sophie's bed each night. With the therapy dog's help, Sophie's memory gradually improved. There were still bad days when she woke confused, but they became the exception rather than the rule. The settlement from the civil suit against Mrs. Warner and the HOA paid for cutting-edge treatments that traditional insurance wouldn't cover. Neurologists from around the country consulted on Sophie's case, amazed by her resilience. One evening, as we sat on our accessible back porch watching the sunset, Sophie turned to me with a curious expression. "Daddy, did I like swings before the bad lady hurt me?" My breath caught. It was the first time she'd referred to her life before without being prompted. "You loved them, Sunshine," I said, using the nickname I'd all but abandoned, afraid it would confuse her. "You used to say you could touch the clouds." Sophie was quiet for a moment, petting Max's soft fur. "I remembered something today," she finally said. "I remembered Mom singing to me. She had a pretty voice." Tears filled my eyes. "Yes, she did. Can we go to a swing tomorrow? A safe one with Max." "Of course we can." That night, for the first time since the attack, I cried myself to sleep, not from despair but from a cautious, trembling hope. 3 years later, Mrs. Warner was released from prison early for good behavior. During her incarceration, she had started a program teaching fellow inmates about disability rights and inclusion. Upon release, she founded a nonprofit dedicated to creating accessible recreational spaces for children with disabilities. She never contacted us directly, respecting the permanent restraining order. But I heard about her work through mutual acquaintances. Part of me wanted to hate her forever, but another part recognized her genuine effort to make amends in the only way she could, by making the world better for children like Sophie. Sophie turned 14 last week. Her memory has improved dramatically, though there are still gaps she may never fill. She no longer asks who I am in the mornings. She remembers her mother's death, though the pain is softer now. She has friends who see beyond her wheelchair to the bright, resilient spirit within. Yesterday, I took her to the adaptive swing at the community playground. As I pushed her higher and higher, her laughter rang out, the same beautiful sound I remembered from that terrible day. "Higher, Daddy," she called. "I want to touch the clouds." And as the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant orange and pink, I swear she did.